Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Politics Relax podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the fuel shortages, which have gripped the UK for the last week or so now. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. As you can probably hear, I have a bit of a cold, but we can get through it. Let's begin. Anybody want to start, or I can just start shouting about Brexit? It's up to you guys. All right. We've been warned about this for many years. I don't know if you remember the government's own report on Yellowhammer. It talked about this specifically on energy. Fewer providers, less choice, higher prices. That was said in the government's own report on Brexit. And now we're finally seeing the results of that. We have a shortage of 100,000 heavy goods vehicles. It's been affecting our country for months now. The people can't get food from grocery stores. They don't have food. I was very American on the grocery stores, but I'll continue. We can't get fuel. We couldn't get gas a few weeks ago, although that was a slightly different problem. It still had implications from Brexit, and now people can't get fuels, and there are queues for like ages. I mean, sure, you can argue that this was a bit of a media frenzy that's been built up, but without Brexit, we wouldn't be having the original report to fuel shortages. I mean, everybody's always known that Brexit was, or a lot of people have always known that Brexit's going to fail, and now we're just seeing the results of that. And I'm very happy that I have my German passport. So good riddance to the UK. No, I'm joking. But anyone else?
It's not exactly all fine in the EU either. They also have had shortages and have had for some while. Not as, in fact, longer than it has been here, although what it currently is like now is worse than it's ever been in the EU. And
go.
Of course, it is a lot easier to move goods around in the EU due to the natural state of the borders and the existence of the Schengen area. So goods can be transported among all the different countries without any checks whatsoever, which just wouldn't work for a country like the UK.
I agree with Felix. I think that a lot of the media sites at the moment have been kind of avoiding the word Brexit. From a lot of the articles I've seen, it's about COVID has been an impact. It's about how panic buying is a huge impact. And I think that it's very easy to kind of blame the public on this. I don't necessarily think that it's completely their fault. There definitely is people who are panic buying, and it's definitely not the best way to go about it. I literally saw a video of a woman filling up a plastic bag full of fuel the other day, which just seemed ridiculous. But I think there is a root cause to this, and I think that it's definitely Brexit.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking on Twitter of all places, and I saw a cartoon from the New York Times. The New York Times is already mocking the UK. The French.
Well, that's their personal hobby.
the French are mocking the UK. I forgot which other country. There was another.
That's also their personal hobby.
I mean, it's everyone's personal hobby because we're a laughing stock on the international scale. Sorry, and that's why we can't get a trade deal with the US.
Well, I'd say the French are still a bit more of a laughing stock.
Who are? The
French.
We can debate that all day, can't we? But the fact is, us leaving the EU was a huge mistake. We can't take it back now, but it makes us a laughing stock on the international scale. And Biden's laughing at us. The EU are laughing at us. Everyone's laughing on us. We can't even get a trade deal with the US anymore. This so-called special relationship.
Northern Irish, the gas stations there, they're not being affected by this, and that could be because they have a border with the EU, which naturally would help a lot. But it also undermines like blaming the whole thing on Brexit, because Northern Ireland isn't in the EU, and yet they're doing fine. So it could certainly be for a variety of other reasons.
Not at all. You mentioned the exact reason why they don't have a big fuel shortage, and it's because they have they have a softer border with the EU, so people can get it much more easily and out.
I just say that I take issue with the whole blaming Brexit thing for a couple of reasons, and firstly touching on the HGV driver shortage. as I already attempted to say earlier, only a fifth of the HGV driver vacancies have been vacated by EU workers moving back to the EU. So therefore, it's wrong to say that this can be all put down to that one singular issue. This has been a deeper running issue for a longer period of time, more relating to actually, I would say, how much we pay our HGV drivers, which is something we've really got to look at. I believe that the average wage for HGV drivers at the moment is between minimum wage and £10 an hour, which is, I think, completely awful pay for the jobs that they're doing. The fact that HGV drivers don't see their families for such extended periods of time, sometimes they have to work during the day, sometimes during the night. We should be paying HGV drivers more. The one thing I would say is that now that there is a much higher demand for HGV drivers, what we're going to see is we're going to see wages naturally increase, which is a good thing. The problem is that once we do get the demand filled with newly trained HGV drivers, we'll probably end up in a situation where those wages could come back down, in which case HGV drivers will have to be very demanding of sticky wages, which is something that could cause conflict in the future. And the other reason that I would take issue with Brexit and HGV drivers being so interlinked is that EU countries are having problems in the HGV driver department. So let me finish, please. Look at Germany, for example, 60,000 HGV vacancies. Poland, 120,000. They're both in the EU. So we're not alone in this. There are HGV drivers across shortages across the country. I was listening on a Radio 4 the other day, I think it was, to the boss of a Dutch logistics company, the CEO of a Dutch logistics company, who said that they were having very similar problems with the number of HGV drivers in Holland. It's not unique to us because of Brexit. There are problems all over the continent. Of course, I'm happy to admit that it has been worsened by Brexit and the fact that EU workers have gone back to the EU, but it cannot be put solely down to that. And now on to the fuel shortages themselves, as they now are. They were not initially fuel shortages, unlike the media reported. Initially, it was a problem with BP's supply chain through Europe, which related to, I think, there's under 20 petrol stations across the country initially shut. Unfortunately, the media over-reported that, over-sensationalized that, and now we're in a situation where the queues outside the petrol stations have been massive and unsustainable. And sadly, that means we now have massive fuel shortages, which is something that is deeply frustrating. The good news is that people can't just fill up their tanks with unlimited amount of petrol. So again, this is something else that will naturally stabilize over time, which is something that we hope will happen sooner or later. But I think we're starting to see that occur this week. So that's positive, I think. And look, of course, that there's going to be difficulties and there's going to have been difficulties, but I don't feel as though these are going to be long lasting by any means.
Cameron, I take issue with your first point about Brexit. Again, I don't agree that it's the sole issue, of course, but it is a huge part. And if we hadn't had Brexit, we wouldn't be experiencing the huge number of shortages that we are. I mean, the Road Haulage Association, I think they employ, is it 50, or they represent or employ, I don't know the exact wording, 50%.
They represent
50% of
they can't employ them.
Yeah, I know. 50% of heavy goods drivers, and they've said that Brexit is a huge part of this. I mean, if you look at Germany are not seeing fuel shortages like we are. It's been hugely, hugely inflated by Brexit, and it. I mean, like every single Remainer has been saying for the last 4 years. I mean, even the government report said this was going to happen.
I mean, look. You can talk about it, and you mentioned Germany. Yes, they're suffering to a lesser degree. They're still suffering. Not much lesser degree. I mean, and you totally ignore my reference to Poland. They're suffering more despite having a much smaller population than us. So, as I say, this is not unique to us, and we shouldn't treat it as though it necessarily is. And you talk about the Road Haulage Association. I wouldn't trust them necessarily, given the fact that it's believed that the leaks about those initial BP petrol shortages came from someone in the Road Haulage Association, which started this entire mass panic. So my view is that it wouldn't be entirely correct to necessarily trust their take on it.
I would disagree with what you said about starting the mass panic, because from what I know, it was basically the government and the media suddenly announced, basically said, don't panic. And then it was that triggered everyone to panic, because as soon as you say don't panic, of course, everyone's going to panic.
No. I take your point about the media. I totally agree with your point about the media. They completely over-sensationalize the issue. But who did the leak go to? The leak went to the media. I'm not sure that you can necessarily directly blame the government for the petrol shortages. That I do think that perhaps they should have just ignored it for a little bit longer. But at the same time, they're the government. They have a job to advise people what to do.
I mean, the road haulage association have been warning about these like shortages for years now, and the government haven't particularly listened to them, which is disappointing. And you talk about the Road Haulage Association leak, I think, which Grant Shapps also said they've responded to that. And they say the unnamed source from the Road Haulage Association did not attend the meeting and was only made aware of BP's warning. So BP were the original people who warned about it, warning on its forecourt fuel stocks by media inquiries after the comments were reported on television. So I think that's a bit untrue to make that remark.
But the leak still happened.
The leak didn't happen through the Road Haulage Association, according to them.
According to them, yeah. Funny that.
Yeah, as opposed to Grant Shapps, who's the most believable man in the world, and this government.
Yes, but why would the Road Haulage Association admit that they leaked it? No one admits that they leak things.
Why would the Road Haulage Association want to hurt why would they I don't really see the clear motivation from them. They've been
no. This is This isn't an attack on the Road Haulage Association as a whole. This is simply stating that it is widely believed and widely reported that it was someone in the Road Haulage Association who leaked this information initially. And that is what has caused this mass panic up and down the country in a situation which now we're seeing hopefully stable.
Yeah, it's certainly not like 1973 or anything like that. There is no Arab countries inflating the oil prices this time. It's just simply a supply chain issue, and I think part of like the long-term factor here is how successive governments have been promoting more and more like people who otherwise would go into jobs like HGV drivers or just other more like apprenticeship jobs, and encouraging those people to go into academic studies in universities, which don't particularly help out with the whole situation with the lack of manufacturing and distribution workers. I mean, I think that's part of it too. But it seems that that it is still trendy to send everyone to university, because I mean it looks good on the the world education reports and things like that.
Wherever the leak originally came from, I think what matters more is of how it was interpreted and how it was dealt with. Because okay, we've got this problem, we've got this report, we all can guess this is going to happen. You know, we know that the government have dealt with this badly, because otherwise we wouldn't have this problem in the first place and it would have been fixed. So, for example, when the government were talking about deploying some army to kind of help with the issue, it was literally nothing. They made a big deal about them bringing out some new drivers. It was going to be okay, when actually there's like 100,000 shortage and they were going to bring out like 125 new drivers, which is just going to do absolutely nothing to help. And this is made as like a big thing to help when it's going to do absolutely nothing. And I think that in the way that they dealt with this is so bad that, you know, it should be said, and it should be spoken about, and not just kind of blaming this association that may or may not have done something bad.
I mean, I would say that the government have acted, and that's a positive thing. I know that Rajan,
in what way have they acted?
Before we came on, Rajan wanted me to make points that he would have made if he were here. So I'll go through some of them. I think that's only fair. And he's saying that of course the government have announced 4,000 people to be trained as HGV drivers.
100,000.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is that, of course, HGV drivers are privately employed, so the responsibility doesn't normally fall onto the shoulders of the government to employ HGV drivers or train them indeed. But what I would say is that, as I said earlier, and this is more of an economic point, HGV drivers' wages will rise over the next few months and years in order to meet the number of vacancies and the demand. So that's something that we should be watching carefully, and that will just be the private sector adapting to the situation, which is quite right. And furthermore, the government they created a new apprenticeship scheme. They launched a skills boot camp, and they've changed the law in order to allow faster HGV testing and training, which is all positive, important stuff, and it is representative and indicative of the government stepping in. But at the end of the day, as I say, this is an issue that the private sector will have to resolve, and I think it will be resolved quickly, hopefully. But again, I want to talk a little bit about specifically the profession of HGV driving and where it's at the moment, because the honest truth is that in a couple of decades the job probably won't exist anymore. It's quite likely that we will have automated vehicles by then doing these kind of jobs. So what people in the sector are saying is that we're essentially in the transition period at the moment, where young people aren't so interested in getting involved in a career that may not exist in a couple of decades. So many of the HGV drivers that we still have are getting older. They will retire soon. So yeah, definitely there's going to be problems in this department, but equally, as I say, the wages will go up, and more people will therefore see this as an attractive short-term prospect.
I agree. I think wages going up will obviously really help, but there is one thing that the government could do, which I think would help possibly even more, is that the fact that our roadside facilities are really awful. And the fact that, you can be driving down the road and you get there and you're like, I need to sleep, I need a shower. And they've just got these horrible conditions. In countries like France, you've got fantastic places to stay. You've got kind of facilities that make your job nicer. In this country, there's literally nothing for that. So drivers don't want to come here. They don't want to be here because it's just frankly horrible. And sorting out situations like that is something that the government could be encouraging further.
I take that point, and having driven through France on a number of occasions, I'm aware of the quality of their roadside facilities being very high, especially in comparison to ours. But then again, I've driven through other European countries, and they have similar or worse facilities to what we have here. So I don't think, again, that could be a part of the issue, yes, but I don't think it can be the sole problem by any means. And I know that we're really, what we're doing is we're identifying a number of factors to why we're in the situation that we're in, and that's quite right.
Just because other countries,
I think it would take
just because other countries have not so great facilities isn't an excuse for us to not have good facilities as well. We should strive to be better.
Of course, but I mean, how awful do you think our facilities are, just as a matter of interest, in comparison to, say, France? If we're looking at making a direct comparison, what are HGV drivers experiencing in France in comparison to here? I know they're better in France, but how big is that difference really?
Pretty big, because it's enough to stop drivers from coming here and wanting to work here.
Yeah, but what specifically about their experience do you think is really different? What can the government exactly implement that is going to improve that.
Building better motorway facilities, like building like cleaner toilets, accommodation. And actually, I think I saw a thing on the radio the other day, and again, don't quote me on this because it's pretty, I don't know, I just remember off the top of my head, but I think it was the government or a Conservative council that blocked a new building on the motorway to make better conditions. So it's simple things like that, like building new, like, and encouraging people to build new service stations and things like that. It will make their job so much easier and better. And this can be applied to so many other things. For example, the NHS, doctors are in, or nurses have terrible conditions. They work long hours and things like that. And simple things just to improve their conditions make the job so much better. And pay, again, is the main thing on that. And as you mentioned, it's probably going to rise, but other things have to happen as well.
So you talk about roadside. I'm just really interested in the exact details here. You talk about roadside accommodation. Now I know that lots of service stations already have cheap hotels, like the Days Inn and stuff like that, for example. But besides that, what more can the government do to step in and to improve accommodation?
Funnily enough, I'm not an expert on motorway service stations.
I'm not asking you to be an expert. I'm asking you.
Why do you expect? How would I know any more than you what this is like?
You're making a point. You're making a point relating to it. So
yeah, because I've listened to the many heavy goods vehicle drivers who've been on the radio, who've been on Twitter over the last few days, and they all say the same thing. It's the conditions are not good enough. I haven't experienced these conditions, so I couldn't really tell you what the government needs to do better. What I can tell you is a lot of people are saying these conditions are not very good, and the government should look into this and see where they can improve, because I'm sure there are ways that they can.
Yeah, the government should be listening, not to people like us, but people are actually experiencing, and then take it from there. It's not our job to tell the government what to do about this issue. It's about them to investigate it and sort out themselves.
Any final? Do you want to make a point, or anyone final points?
I'm not convinced that it's entirely the government's responsibility. I believe that it's important to have good facilities for our HGV drivers, but at the same time, I believe that incentivizing the private sector is the best way of doing that, rather than direct investment. Given the kind of economic status of our roadside services at the moment.
There is definitely, I'm not saying that it's the government, like, I'm not saying it's all the government, not at all, but I'm saying there are definitely ways that they can improve, and they should look to do that. Okay, thank you very much for listening. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Subscribe, like the video, please do it. It really helps us. Cheers.